The executioner's choice. The magistracy dome loomed over the settlement like a great obsidian egg, its polished surface reflecting the harsh light of the twin suns. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of fear and disinfectant, a clinical backdrop to the ritualized cruelty that was about to unfold. Thorn adjusted the ceremonial whip in his hands, feeling its weight, not just physically, but the moral burden it represented. For 6 years, he had served as the magistracy's enforcer, their instrument of justice in this backwater colony on Helios 9. 6 years of following orders, of telling himself he was just a cog in the machine, that he bore no real responsibility for the pain he inflicted. 6 years of watching his soul shrink a little more with each lash he delivered. Today would be different. He knew it the moment they brought her in. The prisoner stumbled between two guards, their white uniforms stark against her auburn hair and the simple gray tunic they dressed her in for the proceedings. Despite the bruises visible on her exposed arms and the dried blood at the corner of her mouth, she walked with her head high, her emerald eyes clear and defiant. Prisoner 7294, Nira Voss, announced the court clerk, voice echoing through the chamber. Convicted of sedition, unauthorized healing, and harboring fugitives from magistracy justice. Thorn felt a ripple of surprise. A healer. They were punishing a healer. The magistracy's obsession with control had reached new depths. Approach the platform, Enforcer Thorn, commanded Magistrate Oren, his thin face impassive behind the ceremonial mask that marked his office. Thorn stepped forward, his boots unnaturally loud on the polished floor. The spectators, colony officials and specially invited citizens brought to witness justice, watched in hushed anticipation. Public punishments were theatrical affairs, designed not just to hurt the condemned but to imprint fear on all who witnessed them. You will administer 15 lashes, Oren continued. Let the record show this is a reduced sentence in recognition of the colony's need for medical practitioners. After rehabilitation, prisoner Voss will serve the Magistracy Medical Corps. Rehabilitation. Thorn knew what that meant. They would break her mind, remake her into a compliant tool. Her healing skills would belong to them, her compassion excised like a tumor. The real Nira Voss would cease to exist. The guard secured her to the punishment frame, arms stretched above her head. The back of her tunic was torn open, exposing pale skin soon to be ribboned with blood. Enforcer, proceed, Oren commanded. Thorn raised the whip, its ceremonial handle cold in his palm. The chamber fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the environmental systems and his own heartbeat in his ears. The prisoner, Nira, turned her head slightly, and for a moment, their eyes met. There was no pleading there, no fear, just a strange calm. Something passed between them in that instant, a silent understanding that pierced through years of Thorn's careful emotional armor. In 6 years, he had never hesitated. Now, his arm refused to complete its arc. Enforcer. Magistrate Oren's voice held a warning note. Thorn looked up at the masked figure, then at the expectant faces of the audience, then back to Nira. Her back rose and fell with steady breaths. Waiting. Preparing. No, he said, the word escaping before he could stop it. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The magistrate leaned forward. What did you say, Enforcer? Thorn's grip tightened on the whip. 6 years of compromise, of small deaths inside him. 6 years of being the hand that enforced an increasingly corrupt rule. He was done. I said no. Louder this time, deliberate. He turned to face Oren fully. Find someone else to do your dirty work. This is treason, Oren hissed. Guards, seize him. Thorn moved before they could react. With a swift motion, he slashed the whip, not at Nira's back, but at the nearest guard. The ceremonial weapon wasn't designed for combat, but the surprise was enough to send the man staggering back. Thorn grabbed the stunner from the guard's belt and fired at the second approaching officer. The chamber erupted into chaos. Spectators screamed and scrambled for the exits. Oren was shouting orders, his mask askew. Thorn spun back to Nira, using the edge of the stunner to break the restraints holding her to the frame. "Can you run?" he asked urgently. She rubbed her wrists, eyes wide with shock and something else, calculation. "Yes," she answered, voice steady despite everything. "But why?" Later, he cut her off, grabbing her arm. "We have about 30 seconds before they lock down the building." Together they sprinted for the service corridor, Thorn firing the stunner behind them to slow pursuit. Emergency sirens began to wail, the sound modulating through the dome's perfect acoustics. This way, Thorn pulled her down a narrow passage that led to the maintenance levels. Few knew the inner workings of the Magistracy Dome as well as he did, advantage of being their feared enforcer for 6 years. They burst through a heavy door into the humid heat of the dome's environmental control section. Steam hissed from pipes overhead, and the massive purification systems thrummed with power. "There's an emergency exit that leads to the Undercity," Thorn explained, catching his breath. "They'll expect us to try for the outskirts, the wilderness. We'll do the opposite." Nira nodded, her breathing ragged but controlled. "You just threw away your life for a stranger," she said, those green eyes studying him with intense curiosity. "Why?" Thorn paused, looking back the way they had come, thinking of the life he was leaving behind. "Not much of a life at all, really. I'm tired of being their weapon," he said finally. "And healers should heal, not be broken into tools for the powerful." A small smile touched her lips, transforming her face despite the bruises. "Well, Enforcer Thorn." "Just Thorn now," he corrected. "Well, just Thorn," the smile lingered, "I think I might be able to help with that tired part. Once we're somewhere safe." The wail of sirens intensified, and the heavy clump of security boots echoed down the corridor behind them. "First, we survive," Thorn said, checking the stunner's charge, less than half remaining. "Then we figure out the rest." He led the way deeper into the environmental section, steam enveloping them like a protective shroud. They were fugitives now, both of them. But for the first time in 6 years, despite the danger and uncertainty ahead, Thorn felt something like freedom unfurling in his chest. The Undercity awaited, dangerous, lawless, but far from the Magistracy's controlling reach. A place where a former enforcer and a rebel healer might disappear, might even find a new purpose. Behind them, the ordered world of the Magistracy receded. Ahead lay only questions and the fragile promise of redemption. As they reached the emergency hatch that would take them outside, Nira stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Thank you," she said simply, those green eyes holding his. Thorn nodded once, unable to put into words the strange certainty he felt about his decision. Instead, he cranked open the hatch, revealing the chaotic sprawl of the Undercity below. Together, they stepped through, leaving behind the polished order of the Magistracy for the uncertain freedom of the shadows. Flight through shadows. The Undercity greeted them with a symphony of decay, rusted metal groaning against the colony's artificial wind, condensation dripping from exposed pipes overhead, and the distant hum of jury-rigged generators powering makeshift homes. Unlike the sterile brightness of the Magistracy Dome, here shadows ruled, broken only by scattered pools of neon light from vendor stalls and illicit pleasure dens. Thorn pulled Nira deeper into the labyrinth of narrow passages, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. He had come here before, of course, enforcing the Magistracy's will even in this forgotten place, but always with backup, always with the authority of his position as a shield. Now he was just another fugitive. "Keep close," he murmured as they passed a group of hollow-eyed scavengers, their arms heavy with salvaged tech. "Down here, everything's a commodity. Including us." Nira nodded, her shoulders hunched slightly, though whether from pain or caution, he couldn't tell. The healing of others clearly hadn't extended to herself, the bruises on her face were darkening, and she winced with each hurried step. They ducked under a cascade of frayed cables and emerged onto what passed for a main thoroughfare in the Undercity, a wide avenue lined with converted shipping containers and structures built from industrial waste. The crowd was a mixture of colony rejects, black market traders, and those who preferred to live beyond the magistracy's watchful eyes. "We need to find shelter," Thorn said, guiding her toward a less populated side street. "Somewhere to regroup." "I know a place," Nira replied, surprising him. "If it still exists. There's a healer's den in the old refinery sector. They helped me when I first started, helping people the magistracy deemed unworthy of care." Thorn raised an eyebrow. "You've been here before. I thought you were from the upper districts. There's a lot you don't know about me." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Just like there must be more to you than the magistracy's favorite enforcer." Before he could respond, a public broadcast screen flickered to life on the wall beside them, drawing his attention. The serene face of Magistrate Oren filled the display, his ceremonial mask now back in perfect position. "Citizens of Helios 9, the amplified voice rang out across the Undercity. Be vigilant. 2 dangerous fugitives have escaped custody, former enforcer Thorn Riker and convicted seditious healer Nira Voss. Their faces appeared on screen, official ID images that made them both look like strangers to themselves. A substantial reward is offered for information leading to their capture. They are to be considered armed and extremely dangerous." "Extremely dangerous," Nira echoed with a bitter laugh. "That's rich coming from them." Thorn pulled his collar higher, obscuring the lower half of his face. "We need to move faster. They'll have informants everywhere." They hurried through increasingly narrow passageways, the infrastructure growing more degraded with each turn. The old refinery district was on the edge of the habitable zone, where the atmospheric processors struggled to maintain breathable air. There, Nira pointed to a squat building with boarded windows and a faded medical symbol spray-painted on the door. "If Veda's still running things, we might find help." As they approached, Thorn's instincts flared. He grabbed Nira's arm, pulling her into a recessed doorway just as a magistracy patrol drone hummed past overhead, its scanning beam sweeping the street. They pressed against each other in the narrow space, barely breathing until the mechanical were faded into the distance. Thorn became acutely aware of her proximity, the warmth of her, the faint herbal scent that clung to her despite everything. "That was close," she whispered, her breath ghosting against his neck. "Too close. They're deploying everything they've got." He peered around the edge of the doorway. "Clear now. Let's go." They covered the final distance to the healer's den in a sprint, Thorn pounding on the reinforced door with urgent restraint, loud enough to be heard inside, but not enough to attract unwanted attention. A viewing slot slid open, revealing wary eyes that widened in recognition. "Nira?" A female voice, cautious and disbelieving. "It's me, Veda. I need help. We need help." The door swung inward, revealing a tall woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight braid. She ushered them inside quickly, securing multiple locks behind them. "By the stars, girl, your face is all over the broadcasts," Veda said, examining Nira with clinical efficiency. Her gaze shifted to Thorn, hardening instantly. "And you brought an enforcer here? Have you lost your mind?" "Ex-enforcer," Thorn corrected, holding his empty hands up in a placating gesture. "As of about an hour ago." Veda looked unconvinced. "Nira, what happened?" As Nira briefly explained their situation, Veda's expression shifted from suspicion to grudging acceptance. The older healer led them through a beaded curtain into a back room filled with mismatched medical equipment, some clearly stolen from magistracy facilities, others cobbled together from salvaged parts. "Sit," she directed Nira toward an examination table. "And you," she pointed at Thorn, "over there where I can see you." Thorn complied, sinking into a chair that creaked under his weight. Now that they had a moment of relative safety, the adrenaline was ebbing, leaving him acutely aware of the stunner burn on his shoulder where a guard had managed to clip him during their escape. Veda worked efficiently, applying salves to Nira's bruises and injecting something that made the younger healer sigh with relief. "They worked you over pretty good," Veda muttered. "Bastards." "Could have been worse," Nira replied, her eyes finding Thorn's across the room. Much worse. Veda followed her gaze. So the famous enforcer Thorn finally found his conscience, did he? After how many lashings? The word stung more than the burn on his shoulder. Too many, he admitted quietly. But not today. Not her. Veda held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. Your turn, she said, gesturing him over. That shoulder needs attention. As she treated him, Thorn noticed the various medicines and supplies organized around the room, many bearing magistracy seals. You've been redirecting supplies, he observed. For years, Veda confirmed, not bothering to deny it. The magistracy decides who deserves care based on their usefulness to the system. I decided that was unacceptable. Why didn't they catch you? Thorn asked, wincing as she applied a stinging antiseptic. Oh, they suspected. But they couldn't prove anything, and I'm careful. Plus, she added with a grim smile, I maintain the private medical supplies for several officials who prefer their recreational injuries kept discreet. She finished bandaging his shoulder and stepped back. You can rest here tonight, but you'll need to move on tomorrow. My protection only extends so far. After Veda left them to prepare food, Thorn found himself alone with Neera for the first time since their escape. She sat on the edge of the examination table, looking smaller somehow, more vulnerable than she had in the magistracy chamber. Why did you really do it? She asked abruptly. And don't give me that line about being tired of being their weapon. That might be true, but it's not the whole truth. Thorn considered deflecting, but something in those green eyes demanded honesty. When I was 16, he said slowly, my sister fell ill. Nothing the authorized healers could do. We heard rumors of an underground healer in our district who worked with experimental treatments. My parents were desperate enough to try. He rubbed his palm absently against his thigh. The magistracy raided the place while my sister was mid-treatment. They arrested the healer, destroyed the medicines. My sister died 3 days later. Neera's expression softened. I'm sorry. When they recruited me for enforcement training, I told myself I was entering the system to change it from within. A bitter laugh escaped him. Oldest self-deception in the book. Instead, the system changed me. Until today, she said quietly. Until today, he agreed. When they brought you in, a healer being punished for healing, something just broke. Or maybe it finally mended. I don't know. Outside, rain began to patter against the roof, the sound amplified by the metal structure. In the distance, magistracy sirens wailed, a constant reminder of the danger. What happens now? Neera asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. Thorn met her gaze steadily. We keep moving. The outer settlements, maybe. Places where the magistracy's control is weaker. We. She raised an eyebrow. You're planning to stick with me? Unless you'd rather I didn't, he replied. But 2 fugitives have a better chance than 1. Especially if one knows how the magistracy hunts, and the other knows how to heal. A smile, the first genuine one he'd seen from her, transformed her face. Partners in crime, then.